Ivan, it's been too long. Hello.
Joe, how are you? Congratulations on your new home.
Well, listen, someone told me podcasting was the way of the future, so I'm only following. Um, Jim Gavin, the Fianna Fáil parliamentary vote was 41 to 29. I know this is possibly a bit more than just Gavin himself. It's about, feelings around Micheál Martin's leadership and just the joys of politicking. But interpret 41-29 for us. Is that resounding? Is that very impressive?
No, but it's not a lot to do with Jim. The deeper significance of this vote, if you asked me to predict it, having listened to both sides, I would have said 45-25. So to get 40% of the vote for Billy Kelleher is not a testament to his prospects of becoming president. It's testament to the criticism of the party leader, Micheál Martin's handling of this excessive secrecy in, no clear pathway, saying they mightn't run a candidate at all, a bit late for people to find out when others had declared. And I think he was somewhat blindsided. So for me, people quite happy to show their dissent in a secret ballot vote. For me, this says that there's no way that Micheál will lead the party much longer after the EU presidency from July to December 2026. You have the rotating Taoiseach situation in November 27. And I think you're seeing the beginning of a lame duck leader. In fairness to him, he is the longest serving Fianna Fáil leader there since 2011, other than De Valera. So he's had a good innings, but this is definitely a portent of the beginning of the end for him.
Okay. Several questions which may be impossible to answer. Who do you think approached who first? How long back do you think these conversations would have been happening? And what do you think Martin sees in Gavin, which is of most value?
To take the latter question first, a legend in Dublin, representative of the GAA, which is the largest voluntary and community organisation in the country. We've seen from the likes of Sean Kelly how potent that can be. I think it's better in this day and age where there's such toxicity and negativity towards politicos to have a public service career rather than be seen to be a political hack. He's a fresh face and he has a great chance of winning. And that's where he beat Billy Kelleher hands down. You won't win anything on 20% of the vote. So the candidate has to reach beyond the party fold and has to be in a position where they're ahead of Fine Gael, because the zeitgeist of Irish electoral politics for the last 18 months has been the high level of transfers between Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil and vice versa. They're in government together. Some people say there's not a cigarette paper between them. So therefore, it's pretty potent combination that if Jim can get ahead of Heather Humphreys, and that is an if, he has a very winnable chance. And I wouldn't disagree with the bookies' odds that make him 4-5, 8-11 odds on at this point in time. So it's his winnability. And, Fianna Fáil love anything. The only enduring principle and value of Fianna Fáil is they love to win elections. Policy principles can go out the window. And so therefore he provides a winning chance and his CV is strong. The downside is he's completely untested in this context. The presidential campaign always throws up more skeletons than exist in Glasnevin Cemetery. And so therefore the scrutiny that he will come under, his personal life, his marital life, his financial life, that of his siblings, everything. I've seen this with Eddie Roach and her brother. I've seen it with David Norris and his former partners, not to speak of only in the last 24 hours, Billy Kelleher's brother Donal got a lot of coverage in the independent newspaper about his financial woes. So everything is fair game. But as I once texted Jim Gavin, as you know, I'm prone to have a bet. And in those days, Dublin was a good investment to win the All-Ireland. And I on one occasion text Jim And his reply was, when I said, it's a lot of money at stake for me here, he just said, helmets on. And that I suppose speaks to the one question there's two questions I have about Jim's candidacy. If you ask me to sort of do a SWOT analysis, what are the threats? The first threat is his connection with women, in terms of, will he get against two strong female candidates and maybe a third Sinn Féin female candidate, and a general feeling that they'd like a female president, Mary Robinson, Mary McAleese, and so on. I think the fact that he's not a woman is definitely a negative. And while geography is in his favour with Dublin, there is the question of his personality. Because with the greatest respect to you and your colleagues, I think a lot of sports journalism, when it comes to not analysis but interviews, they tend to be nothing short of fawning, because you're so desperate to get the interview that you actually won't tell them to their face what maybe someone on prime time will do, or certainly what an opponent will do. And therefore, he if he responds in an abrasive way to really kind of nasty questioning, it will be very interesting, because he could afford to be terse, he could afford to not to do interviews, and to sort of treat the media as almost supplicant. That will not work in this context. So, and like that is the real skill of an interviewer, to get them to lose their rag. Will he lose his rag? For me, is a big question.
And the two probably difficult questions to answer: how long do you think this has been cooking, and who do you think approached who?
Oh, I've no doubt that Fianna Fáil approached Gavin. Right. I don't know it for a fact, but like, the situation is, Sean Dorgan, Secretary General of the party, was tasked to come back with the best options, and I wouldn't surprise me if some people at the heart of the GAA and Fianna Fáil, particularly in Dublin, and I've heard names associated with fundraising and so on that he's doing, that would be well connected. But actually, someone texted me about 15 days ago from the law library, and I was out having a recreational walk on a Sunday, and said, I'm hearing the name of Jim Gavin from the right sources. And I immediately text 3 Fianna Fáil backbenchers who are the most inveterate gossips I could think of. And it landed on the front page of Monday's Independent. So, like, the fact of the matter is, you don't have to be a genius to work out that Jim Gavin is a potentially sensational catch for Fianna Fáil. I'd say Sinn Féin would be glad to have him. The left would be glad to have him. Like, there was some talk, although Eamon O'Riordan absolutely said it wasn't true, it wasn't him, that Labour had approached him previously. Like, there's not too many people in Ireland have won and coached 6 All-Irelands, 5 in a row, whatever it is. It is the stuff of legend. Yeah. And throw in his army career, his civil aviation career, is pretty strong stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Will he, in like an interview, because Joanna Donnelly was hit with this by Kieran Cuddihy, and she kind of, I just voted with the majority every way, and then he went, so you voted against Lisbon? I can't remember. Is Gavin going to have to do a checklist of, where do you stand on these 15 huge issues of the last 20 years? Give us which way you voted, that kind of thing. Is he, as a candidate, do you think it's viable for him to say, well, look, I really don't want to get into that?
No, it won't be viable. But I think, I've already seen him sort of take centrist positions. I voted for marriage equality. I supported the woman's right to choose in the last second abortion referendum, and all kind of safe Fianna Fáil positions. What's much more tricky for him will be, we're going to have a budget on the 7th of October. You see the type of grief that Simon Harris has got into with the death of Harvey and scoliosis. Like, once you become a Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil candidate, there is, 25% of the electorate and 95% of social media will urinate on you from a height. And it'll be absolutely case of being Teflon about it, insofar as that, there's nothing he can do about this. And what he's just got to do is keep smiling, answering questions that are valid. But there will be very tricky questions. But the ones that become fatal are personal, our family, and those type of questions, or past finances. And you know what I mean? I have nothing to allege or anything like that, but don't be surprised if, I had to laugh when I saw Heather calling for a clean campaign. There's two chances that no hope and Bob hope.
Yeah, he will take on the sins of Fianna Fáil. What is it about the government, the party that crashed the country and ruined all these lives that attracted you, Jim? These are the kind of irritating questions that he won't like, and they're significant questions. And then equally, I think he'll almost have a disdain for the trivial questions, the nonsense that he'll get at. What are you watching on Netflix, Jim? And how, it's not in his DNA to engage with that kind of stuff, I suppose. So you give
the other thing I would just say in terms of his CV and career that hasn't been highlighted, his role in the Citizens' Assembly chairing that, by all accounts, is professional. But the Northeast Dublin Inner City project, I've heard anecdotes of him walking around Mountjoy Square, speaking to druggies, speaking to migrants, clearly migrants who are maybe homeless. And he actually developed a kind of altruistic passion for that. And it is perhaps one of the toughest areas in the country in terms of deprivation and disadvantage. I actually think the non-sport story of Jim Gavin, he just isn't employed by the Irish Aviation Authority. I happen to know about the last recruitment process for the COO position, which is really deputy CEO. And it was quite intense internally and externally. And put it like this, it's a pretty strong CV, and I'm sure there'll be lots of anecdotes to go to it. So I will factor in that he will make mistakes along the lines, and there will be pitfalls and minefields for him. But I would go as far as to say, and I wouldn't be underestimating Heather, it's his to lose at this stage.
Right. So the CV is so strong that he can afford not to be the world's greatest campaigner, and even people might forgive that given he's new to it.
Exactly. And also, let's be clear about it. We're facing a pretty interesting election because a poll had all three of the front runners on 20% and only 1% between them. And that is of interest in terms of, a horse race. The fact of the matter is, most people will probably not go vote. If it's a wet, day in October, and it's on a Friday, and that's the start of half term and the holiday Halloween weekend, and if people are going away, whatever, you could be looking at a 40-something% turnout.
Yeah.
And therefore, what's really important is how effective is your campaign? And I'm looking at a situation where between Jim's own resources of fundraising, which might stretch to 150, 200,000, and Fianna Fáil's 500,000, with a good chance of recouping 250 of that I could see a postering campaign, I could see a household leaflet campaign, I could see a campaign bus with all the bells and whistles, which would in itself be pretty formidable, regardless of the personality of Jim.
You look presidential already, I suppose. And for all that the presidential election is such an odd campaign because it's not really issue-based in the true sense, it is quite notable. Michael D. Higgins, Mary McAleese, Mary Robinson, these are serious people. The electorate, when it comes down to it, they don't tend to go too crazy. I mean, Peter Casey obviously he captured something in the privacy of the voting booth more recently, but you look at the track record here, like that speaks well for Gavin. You would think they're his people. They carry themselves in a similar way.
Yeah, and to go further statistically, and I'm maybe out of date, Fianna Fáil, anytime they've contested the presidential election, last time 1997, which is a long time ago, they've only been beaten once.
Right.
Like Fine Gael have never won it, and in a shootout between FG and FF, Dublin versus the border counties, and the GAA, reaching beyond Fianna Fáil, I could see him getting Fine Gael votes because of the GAA.
Yeah, interesting.
like, I'd like to see Sean Kelly's ballot paper. You know what I mean? So, like, at the end of the day, I think it is his to lose, but don't be surprised if he does lose it, because Heather is formidable. Now, the other dark horse, as we're speaking today about this, is I don't believe. So I said throughout the summer, there is no way that Mary Lou will be a candidate. The downside risks were just too great. And even if she won, it mightn't be great for Sinn Féin. So to spend 3 months procrastinating about that and to put forward the 20th September suggests to me that there's a deliberate reason for leaving it so late. And the only supposition I have is that Michelle O'Neill is in a job and would want the minimum period of being distracted from being First Minister. So if she was nominated in June, everyone in the North would be going berserk. You're not doing the day job. So I do think she is a very interesting candidate potentially. I don't think there's anyone in their parliamentary party in the South that could do it, but I could see how she could, again, female, the whole narrative in relation to border poll, the whole hands across the border, kind of sending a message out and all of that kind of thing. I put it like this, I could see, I find it impossible that Sinn Féin would opt out. I find it not credible. So leaving aside sitting it out, to support Catherine Connolly at this 11th hour, when since really February, they have balked and said, well, good luck to her. But they were never really saying they were strongly supportive. So, like, if they do back her, which I think is unlikely, I don't think it's that credible, to be honest with you, because they had multiple opportunities to be enthusiastic about her and haven't been.
I'd be fascinated for your perspective on the sporting candidate generally. I mean, this is ostensibly a sports podcast. So, I mean, Jack Lynch, I guess, sort of looms large as best in class, really. In the kind of cynical, nasty corners of the Dole Bar, which you would have frequented, how are these sporting candidates regarded?
Very much depends on the individual. Sean Kelly, it was a plus. John O'Mahony, it was a plus. Those are the ones I'm most familiar with. But put it like this, every party in every election is looking for someone who will get you beyond your tribal market share. And so therefore, the whole, while, there is the sort of grab all association resentment of the GAA, the truth of it is it's community network at club level, at junior level, at underage level, is pretty influential with parents, is pretty enduring through the traditions, and in rural Ireland runs particularly deep. So if you got an all-star or a county hurler or whatever who actually had something between their ears, was actually genuinely empathetic with people, I would say definitely a sports candidate is a plus. If they're a fancy Dan who looks down their nose and thinks they're superior and had it quite soft and lived through adulation and weren't prepared for the hard yards of, going through organizations and the door-to-door slog of it all. So therefore, it's down to the individual primarily, but I would say definitely it's a plus.
Okay. And generally, the public can see through it. The entitled, well, vote for me. I mean, I scored all those goals. They can sense that, you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there has to be a more enduring, deeper sense of community. That is what. I mean, look, I always say to people, when you're speaking to an audience, or when you're speaking to voters, or you're speaking to potential buyers, written on their forehead is, how does this benefit me? And voters think like that. Will this person advance my, pork barrel politics? Will he be someone or her, someone I could knock on if I had a problem with a medical card? Is it someone who'll be empathetic to my family situation? And so on. Will they be a proponent of the area? So those are the big issues. But put it like this, if you had a strong, put it like this, I'm not sure Davy Fitzgerald would top the poll, but I could think of maybe someone from the Premier County who had a strong sort of community ethos. It would be a big plus in Tipperary. You know what I mean? But the other thing is that name recognition in a world where people only have, passing interest in politics, name recognition is important.
Yeah. It's funny. I've spoken to a few people who don't like sport in the last couple of days. It is interesting when you meet people who say, I've never heard of this Jim Gavin guy before. You can become a little bit.
Yeah. Well, put it like this. I think that's more a reflection on them than it is on Jim Gavin, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like, what sort of rock have you lived under?
I
mean, I remember this, and this applies to social media. People say things that aren't true.
Yeah.
If you were to say back in the day, Brian Cody, Kevin Heffernan, Sean Boyle, and Mick O'Dwyer, at their height and within proximity of their glory, did you hear the tell of them? You know what I mean? The answer is they have been heard tell.
Well, it's funny. Somebody, her name escapes me now. She was on the Sunday panel on the Brendan O'Connor show, was saying, I'd never heard of this man before. So
yeah, I know. But put it like that. I actually thought that is kind of reflective of RTE's snowflake wet wipe type of social liberal left-wing person that's on their panels, who's actually pretty much out of touch with Middle Ireland.
Sorry, you're not in a snowflake bonus with me. That's the other podcast. One last one. I'm in two minds about even going here because, you just don't even want to really amplify it. But Jim Gavin is a seriously high-profile sports candidate now. The other, and I suspect his candidacy is not going to last very long, released this video last week outside government buildings. Just have a listen. This is a condensed version of his launch, I suppose you would call it.
Good morning, citizens of Ireland. I'm here today outside the office of the Taoiseach in Taoiseach, where we are over 200 days into the formation of current government. As a master of martial combat, a solution-driven man, you will hear me speak on a problem but once. Then it is action towards solution. Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
It's hard to know where to start with that, really, isn't it?
Well, first of all, I took an outlier position to say that all 14 potential putative independent candidates were not going to get support of 525 councillors from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael outside the 949. And I'd be interested to see what Sinn Féin councillors actually do if they have a candidate in the field. So first of all, I felt most of them were pissing in the wind and going nowhere. And actually were, because it was the silly season and because the parties were keeping their cards close to their chest, they were given a profile and a credibility from Joanna Donnelly right across to Michael Flatley and Conor McGregor. But in fairness to some of those, they actually have made a real effort to connect with councils, to get proposers and seconders. Conor McGregor hasn't done any of that. This is the biggest bullshit bottle of smoke I've ever seen, insofar as he hasn't, even with his resources, made any real attempt to get anyone in public life to actually support him. So this was always a phantom project that had no substance, even in terms of how sincere it was.
Yeah.
However, I have to say, I don't know how many followers on whatever platform you have, Joe, but I have to say 40 million followers is a lot. So let's be clear about it. Conor McGregor's appeal is in the US of A, is not in Ireland. And for a lot of people who have some very twisted views of politics and very kind of primary colour, black and white views of politics and free speech and hate speech and all that kind of thing, he's maintaining that image for them. It has no real connection with the Irish electorate.
Yeah. I was wondering this campaign, maybe it's too late. So, McGregor, in the kind of most ham-fisted way imaginable, is anti-immigration and all the kind of tropes, and some of them are actually just very American. They don't even apply to here. But I was wondering on the immigration situation, that is bubbling away. I think in the privacy of the voting booth, there are a lot of people who feel the number of immigrants over the last 4 or 5 years in particular, well in excess of 100,000, is getting a little, they're concerned about it. And the presidency, because in effect it's about, there's no real power to it. It's a kind of tempting protest vote for people without having to risk putting in some far right madman. I was wondering, would and a more credible one than McGregor, but would a kind of protest vote, I mean, anti-immigrant vote, be a big factor in this election? I'm not seeing evidence of it so far.
Yeah, and in a general election, which is a lot easier to penetrate into, they really elected no TD in the Dáil. They did elect up to sort of single-digit councillors, and that was a breakthrough of sorts. I do believe that a third of the electorate have concerns not about migration per se or about a cosmopolitan, multicultural side, but they do have a problem with illegal migration, whereby they see a lot of state resources maybe jumping the queues for other things, and at a time where maybe there's potential changing winds of economic misfortune coming our way, a la FDI and global factors and so on. I think that resentment and difficulty, and over the last 4 years, we've put 2.65 million into IPAS centres and into non-Ukrainian migrant expenditure. So I am not part of the kind of woke consensus that says this is a non-issue. It is an issue. It's particularly an issue in working class Ireland and in inner city Ireland, and has bedeviled Sinn Féin, and is the reason why they're not the largest Oireachtas party, because they have chosen the progressive side of that argument. But looking at the potential of 4 candidates in the field, if Sinn Féin run a candidate, I don't see anyone really capturing that. But to be honest with you, I think it's kind of umpteen% of the electorate, and will not, that could be decisive in preferences and so on. But put it like this, I don't think that choice will be in the ballot paper. And let's be quite honest about it, that, there's so many issues. This is my real problem with Gareth Sheridan, and that, masquerading, I'll bring the younger generation home for Australia, I'll solve the housing problem. This is beyond false promises. This is actually misleading. And so therefore the point I'm making is that, look, this president election will become a little bit esoteric at the end of the day. And, they'll all have to put their kind of manifestos out there. But the truth of it is that the candidates that are shaping up are not going to shape the Constitution.
Yeah. Okay, well then last one, to bring it back to Jim Gavin. Say he rings you and he says, live debates on television, sticky questions from journalists. What's the best advice for me? How do I handle this?
Well, first of all, I charge a fortune for that type of advice, and I don't talk about my clients. So that's the first answer about that. In a kind of fanciful way, what would I say to that? I would say, first of all, preparation. You need the ugliest, nastiest, meanest preparation, where someone will be absolutely horrible to you, so that when you're faced with Sarah McInerney or anyone else, it'll be a piece of cake. You just can't be hard enough on yourself in the preparation, would be my strongest advice.
Okay, very good. Listen, fascinating to get your thoughts on it all. So you, from this vantage point, you're Gavin, the person to beat. You make him.
Yeah, it's his to lose. It's his to lose. He's got the biggest party. He's going to have the biggest budget. He's from the biggest, the geography is most in his favour. But I've seen people with greater leads, winning opportunities, fluff it. But I do think, unless Michelle O'Neill runs, I don't think that Catherine Connolly will be in the final count. And I think that the transfers between Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil will definitely provide the winner. So I'm not writing off Heather Humphreys, but if you gave me a free tenner or 100 grand to bet, I would put it on Jim Gavin.
Okay. Listen, great to get your insight. Really do appreciate it again. Ivan Yates, thank you.
Pleasure as always, Jim.